we love routines. You and
We
I,
do.
we love routines. We love habits, and we develop routines whether they're intentional or not. And overworking begets or gives birth to or gives rise to overworking. Isolation from our spouse leads to more isolation from our spouse. Disconnection from our children leads to more disconnection from our children.
So you're saying that we can't, or it's not feasible to kind of, I don't know, you hear the people talk about like, I'm going to put my head down and grind for 3 years. And then after the 3-year period, then that's when I'm going to spend time with my family.
That's the theory. And I would actually agree with that. 3 years is a little long. You have to figure out some strategies. I think we could do completely different podcasts on how do you do this in the first 3 years of a business or first 3 to 5 years of a business, and then how do you do it afterwards? Because it really is two completely different kinds of organizational responsibility.
I just threw 3 years out there. So if anytime more than 3 years, you think that's going to be too long of a time period?
I would tell you that what we have to be careful of is that there are seasons where we have to roll up our sleeves and put more work in for a business to succeed, especially to launch a business.
Yeah.
What we have to be aware of is that we have to take the approach that this is seasonal, and we have to know when that season ends. We have to have a goal, and we have to work toward that, because the easiest thing for us once we develop a habit is to continue the habit. None of us are great at change. So what happens is guys tell their wives or tell their spouses, whether it's male or female, that we've found there's not a lot of difference in the gender, whether male or female starting a business, or if you're starting a business together, you accept we're not going to have as much family time, as much connection time on a day-to-day for this long. But once you establish that habit, it's actually easier to continue the habit than it is to change, even when the change is for the better.
It's comfortable. Like it becomes comfortable. As weird as that sounds, it's like, oh, you're a workaholic? Well, I guess I am, but I would be crazy. I'd go stir crazy if I was just sitting at the house.
Because another word for comfortable for most of us is familiar. We like the familiar. And if we establish this is what I'm used to, this is familiar, then that's what will continue. Yeah. I'll tell you what I did in my own life, and what I teach a lot of business owners is, you've probably seen this illustration before that uses the jar, and you can put different things into it. But typically the jar, you have rocks. You put rocks in the jar, these big rocks. You put some smaller rocks in the jar. Then you put some gravel. Then you put some sand. Then you put some water, and it'll all fit. Mm-hmm. But if you take all that out and you start the other way, and you start with the water and you start with the sand, and you'll never get the big rocks in. Yeah. And the idea of that illustration is the big rocks represent the priorities. And most of us are good at identifying on a cerebral level. We're good at identifying what our priorities should be and what we espouse our priorities to be. In other words, what I said earlier, aspirations. What we're not good is we're not good at settling in on what does that look like on a daily basis. So let me give you an example of my own life right now, okay? And let me say, first of all, this changes with seasons. They adapt some. So the first priority I would tell you, and I'm just sharing this in order. I'm not saying they're 1, 2, 3, but like one of my priorities is my marriage, and I want to invest in my marriage. Okay. So if I want to invest in my marriage, that's a priority. A second priority for me, and what I decided was my priorities, is what are the essentials? What are the things that if these things are unhealthy, they will affect every other aspect of my life, including my business? Mm-hmm. Because if I'm at work thinking about my broken marriage, I'm not fully at work.
Right.
And one of the goals for my life is I want to be fully present wherever I am. I want to be fully present with my kids. I want to be
How? Like in technology world today?
Good question. It takes a lot of intentionality. It takes commitment. It takes saying, how do I do this on a day-to-day basis? And that's where I'm going. So let me tell you the rest of this. So three priorities for me. One of mine is, at my age, I look around and most of my friends are not in great shape, and it takes them 2 minutes to get up off the couch, and you can hear the joints cracking and all that. And I decide, you know what? I'm going to prolong that as long as I can, because I think it's better for my work. I think it's better for my marriage, for my parenting, if I'm in good shape. So exercise is one of my priorities. Another priority is I decided I believe that we are all in the process of growing or dying. Biologists tell us that every living cell is either growing or dying. And I believe that's true for all of us. And I decided a long time ago, I want to grow as long as I can. And by growing, I mean learning new things. So one of the things that I do is I decided I want to be a lifelong learner. That's one of my priorities. Now, for me personally, I include my spiritual life in that. So I'm not leaving God and faith and Christianity out of this. I'm saying that's part of my learning. So part of my learning, scripture and prayer and accountability with other guys, I include that in learning, as well as reading books and watching podcasts and videos and classes and those kind of things. So what does that look like? What I did is I decided, you know what? These three areas, exercise, learning, and my marriage, I'm going to invest at least 30 to 60 minutes a day, every single day.
That seems like a lot when you can't even get all your emails, or you can't get all these fires put out. But then you think about how many times you got on TikTok or Facebook, or just mindlessly we're scrolling through something else. And it's very doable as long as that's the first thing that went in the jar, not the last.
So it does seem like a lot, but put it this way. Between those three things, most days it's about 2 hours. Some days significantly less. I mean, some days I only get 20 minutes into one of those things, but it's significantly less. But at least 5 out of 7 days, I want to get 30 to 60 minutes for those three things. So if you got 30 minutes in each one of those, it's an hour and a half. That leaves, if my math is right, that leaves 22 and a half hours a day to sleep, to work, to parent, to do all these other things that I need to get done. And I'm going to tell you something that nobody believes until they try it. If you get the big rocks in the jar first, everything else fits.